In June of 2012, 22-year-old Anna Mayer and her fiancé, 26-year-old Aaron Norman, disappeared while diving in the springs of Guinea Springs, Florida. A search operation in the Santa Fe River lasted 7 days, but yielded no results. 4 years later, in June 2016, the skeletons of 2 people in diving suits were found at a depth of 50 feet in a remote underwater cave. The findings became the basis for reopening the case and conducting additional forensic examinations. The chronology of events and the official conclusions of the investigation are presented below. The events in this story are presented as a narrative interpretation. Some elements have been altered or recreated for storytelling purposes. On June 12, 2012, as the humid Florida air became so thick it was almost tangible, and the temperature in Gilchrist County crossed the 90-degree mark, 22-year-old Anna Mayer and her 26-year-old fiancé, Aaron Norman, arrived at Guinea Springs Private Park. Hannah, a biology student who has spent the last 4 years studying the unique ecosystems of freshwater springs, saw this trip not just as a vacation, but as an opportunity to see firsthand the complex structure of the Santa Fe River's underground tunnels. Her mother later told detectives that her daughter was extremely responsible, energetic, and always planned her every move in detail, which made her subsequent disappearance even more incomprehensible to her family. Aaron Norman, a successful manager in his father's construction company, was reported by receptionists to have appeared somewhat irritated and impatient while processing dive permits. One of the park technicians recalled that Aaron spoke abruptly, trying to complete the formalities as quickly as possible, while Anna looked at a map of the cave system with interest. The couple's friends described Aaron as a man of action who was always boundlessly dedicated to his goals, but sometimes showed excessive rigidity in his dealings with staff. Around noon, the couple loaded their equipment onto a small cart and headed for the shore, where the entrance to the famous Devil's Eye Spring is located. At the time, the water was crystal clear and its constant temperature was 72 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the plan they had discussed with their friends the day before, Anna and Aaron were to complete the dive and return to their rented house, the River Breeze Villa, no later than 8 o'clock in the evening. The friends had already prepared dinner and were waiting for them to return, but when the clock struck 9 and there was no word from the couple, the company began to grow anxious. Aaron's phone, which he usually never turned off because of work-related matters, was out of reach. At 9:30 in the evening, unable to wait any longer, the friends drove to the park's parking lot. There, in the light of the moon, they found Aaron's silver SUV standing alone under the crowns of oaks covered with Spanish moss. Inside the car, their cell phones, wallets, and spare clothes were visible through the glass. Realizing that there was trouble, one of those present immediately called 911. The police arrived at the scene around 11 o'clock in the morning. During an initial inspection of the shoreline, officers found 2 pairs of sneakers and 2 travel bags on a wooden pier, which were neatly stacked in the shade of trees. This confirmed that the couple had indeed entered the water. An hour later, a team of rescue divers arrived at the scene. Using powerful searchlights, they began to inspect the water surface and coastal thickets, hoping that the divers had simply been carried away by the current and were able to get to shore somewhere downriver. However, the nighttime combing of the area yielded no results. At dawn the next day, the divers made their first dive in the Devil's Eye area. At a depth of about 20 feet, right at the entrance to the cave opening, one of the rescuers noticed a bright object. It was Hannah's damaged mask. The silicone strap was torn, and deep scratches were visible on the plastic glass. Nearby, on the rocky bottom, was a single black flipper. Finding these items in this condition indicated a possible panic or collision with an obstacle. Investigators put forward a preliminary version of the accident, suggesting that the strong current of the Santa Fe River could have disoriented the pair, caused the air supply regulators to malfunction, or simply dragged them into intricate underwater tunnels where it is easy to lose orientation. The search operation expanded and lasted 7 days in a row. Divers worked in extremely difficult conditions, moving through narrow limestone passages where visibility often dropped to zero due to silt raised from the bottom. Special underwater drones with high-definition cameras were deployed, but no other trace of Hannah or Aaron was found. Hannah's mother, who had not left the riverbank all these days, repeatedly told the police that her daughter was too experienced to make such a fatal mistake and asked them to check the version of outsiders' involvement. However, at that time, law enforcement officers found no signs of a struggle on the shore or suspicious footprints near the car. On June 20, 2012, after more than 500 feet of the most dangerous parts of the cave had been explored, the active phase of the search was officially terminated. The sheriff's official report stated that there was no chance of finding the couple alive, and their bodies were likely to remain trapped forever in one of the many branching passages that could not be explored without endangering the lives of rescuers. Hannah Mayer and Aaron Norman were officially declared missing, and the case was sent to the archives as a tragic accident caused by the forces of nature. 4 years passed, during which the story of the disappearance of Hannah Mayer and Aaron Norman gradually turned into one of those dark urban legends that are retold to visitors to Guinea Springs Park around evening bonfires. On June 16, 2016, when the daytime heat in Alachua County reached 95 degrees Fahrenheit, a group of 3 adventurous teenagers, including Tyler Clark and Aiden Ross, decided to explore a remote and virtually undocumented sector of the Santa Fe River cave system. This section, located at a considerable distance from popular routes, was considered technically challenging even for professionals due to extremely narrow passages that in some places were no more than 20 inches wide. The teens, using modern, powerful LED lights and minimal diving equipment, pushed deep into the intricate underwater maze to a distance of about 350 feet from the main channel. According to Tyler Clark, who later testified to sheriff's officers, they were looking for new angles for underwater photography when they noticed a strange anomaly in the far corner of a small cavern that was 50 feet deep. In the beams of the flashlights that cut through the absolute darkness of the cavern, they saw 2 dark objects partially stuck in the limestone depression. As they approached, the young men realized that they were not natural formations, but human bodies draped in black neoprene wetsuits. Thanks to the insulating properties of the material and the specific chemical composition of the water in this part of the cave, the suits almost perfectly preserved the shape of the bodies, creating the illusion that the people were just frozen in anticipation. However, white bone fragments were visible through the torn seams and open parts of the helmets. The frightened teenagers immediately left the danger zone and called the emergency service at 17 hours 45 minutes. An hour later, the area was cordoned off, and a special underwater search and recovery team arrived at the site. The coordinator of the operation, Detective Michael Miller, noted in his report that the difficulty of recovering the remains was unprecedented. Divers had to work one at a time, carefully moving the bodies through narrow rock fissures where visibility was instantly reduced to zero due to the raised sediment. On June 17, 2016, at 3 in the afternoon, both wetsuits with the remains were brought to the surface and taken to the Alachua County Medical Examiner's office. Investigators immediately noticed the way the bodies were positioned in the cave. They were lying parallel to each other, neatly placed in a natural depression that looked more like a deliberate burial than an accidental drowning death. The identification process lasted several days. Forensic anthropologists conducted a detailed scan of the remains, and genetics experts worked to isolate DNA profiles. On June 20th, the results of the examination were ready. They completely matched the samples provided by the parents of the missing couple 4 years ago. This officially confirmed that the found divers were 22-year-old Hannah Mayer and 26-year-old Aaron Norman. The local press instantly picked up the news of the return from oblivion, and the case, which had previously been considered a tragic accident due to equipment failure or panic, was officially reopened. The homicide detectives began to study in detail the photos of the site taken by the teenagers and later by the rescuers. One detail immediately caught the attention of experienced forensic scientists. Some critical equipment was missing from the site of the bodies, including weight belts, which usually help divers stay buoyant. Reopening the case meant a complete review of all the evidence collected in 2012, including the condition of the car, surveillance footage from the entrance to the park, and personal belongings found on the shore. Aaron's father hired a private investigator upon learning of the discovery, telling the press that he never believed in the version that his son, who was an open water diver and always took excessive precautions, had made a mistake. Investigators began preparing the remains for deeper microscopic analysis, hoping that the bones, which had been in isolation for 48 months, would be able to tell them what was hidden beneath the water column. Every scratch on the equipment, every piece of tissue, was now being examined from a different angle. The police began a series of new interrogations, focusing on those who last saw Anna and Aaron alive at the entrance to the Devil's Eye. Realizing that the cave that was supposed to be their grave had actually become a place where the truth was just waiting to be discovered. The discovery in the remote sector, where it is almost impossible to get there by accident, changed the investigators' mindset, forcing them to look for answers not in the elements, but among the people who were with the couple on that fateful June day. The question of how the two young people ended up in a dead end of the cave system at such a considerable distance from their planned route became the key to the new phase of the investigation. While the public discussed the mystical aspects of this tragedy, forensic scientists were preparing to examine the bones themselves, suspecting that the true causes of Anna and Aaron's deaths had nothing to do with lack of oxygen or accidental disorientation. The search team that worked in June of 2016 prepared an extended 30-page report stating that no signs of struggle or damage to the cave walls were found within 10 feet of the bodies, which could indicate that the victims had attempted to escape the trap in their final moments. On June 21, 2016, a special team of detectives, along with leading experts in underwater caving and hydrology, returned to the remote sector of the Guinea Springs cave system to conduct a detailed forensic reconstruction of the remains. Upon re-examination of the cavern, which was located at a depth of 50 feet, it was determined that the entrance opening to this maintenance tunnel was only 22 inches wide, making it virtually impossible for two adults to have accidentally entered at the same time due to natural forces. The state hydrologist involved in the investigation prepared a report stating that the Santa Fe River flows at about 4 miles per hour in the area, but that the specifics of the underground flows in the Devil's Eye area direct water away from the walls and toward the main channel, rather than deep into the dead-end branches. This scientifically refuted the original version of 2012 that the bodies of Hannah Mayer and Aaron Norman could have been carried into the cave spontaneously. In his report, Detective Michael Miller emphasized that the position of the skeletons was anatomically unnatural for drowning victims. They lay parallel to each other, aligned along the horizontal axis of a narrow stone niche, indicating that the remains had been deliberately and carefully placed by an unauthorized person. In parallel with the field work, in-depth analysis of the skeletons continued at the Alachua County Medical Examiner's Office. Since the 7-millimeter thick neoprene wetsuits provided relative insulation from the outside environment, experts were able to examine the residues of organic compounds in the internal cavities of the bones. The results of the tests showed a complete absence of diatoms and specific silt sediment in the airways and lungs of Anna and Aaron, which is always present in the lungs of people who died of classic drowning in this river system. This allowed the investigators to conclude that at the time a large amount of water entered the victim's airways, the victim was no longer making active breathing movements. Forensic experts focused on mechanical damage to the bone tissue, which became apparent after the skeletons were completely cleaned of mineral deposits. A detailed scan of the skulls of both victims revealed identical depressed fractures in the parietal bone area. The nature of these injuries, smooth edges, and a clear geometric shape of the dents, indicated blows with a heavy blunt object applied with great force. On Aaron Norman's skeleton, the forensic anthropologist recorded additional injuries. Fractures of the 5th, 6th, and 7th ribs on the left side, with the angle of the fracture indicating a blow from the front, when the man was in an upright or semi-bent position. An examination of the diving equipment by underwater safety technicians revealed anomalies that were previously thought to be the result of prolonged exposure to water. However, a microscopic examination of the air supply regulators revealed microscopic scratches and deformations of the metal inside the valves. Experts concluded that the mechanism had been deliberately blocked with a thin metal tool before the cylinders were even used. This meant that Anna and Aaron could have started the dive with a limited supply of oxygen, which suddenly stopped at depth, causing a state of acute hypoxia and disorientation. The investigation established the following chain of events. Someone damaged the couple's equipment, waited until they were helpless underwater due to asphyxiation, and then the attacker stabbed them to death with a blunt object, giving them no chance to resist. Trace evidence experts emphasized that the shape of the deformities on the ribs and skulls exactly matched the contours of a heavy wrench or metal lever used by personnel to fix cylinders at gas stations. In addition, a subtle darkening of the fabric was found on the inner surface of Hannah Mayer's wetsuit, which, after chemical analysis, was identified as traces of a high-viscosity technical lubricant not used by ordinary amateur divers. This set of evidence finally ruled out the possibility of an accident. The investigation team began to work on the profile of a person who had professional knowledge of the operation of air regulators and had free access to the most inaccessible points of the cave system, where it was possible to hide 2 bodies so that they would not be found for 4 years. Police also noticed that the victims' weight belts, which normally weigh between 10 and 15 pounds, were not found at the site of the body's discovery. This indicated that the killer may have deliberately removed them to make it easier to move the bodies through the narrow fissures of the cave. Each new forensic discovery only confirmed that the events of June 2012 were a cold-blooded and carefully planned double murder, where nature was to be the perfect accomplice in concealing the crime. The findings allowed the Alachua County prosecutor to officially change the status of the case to aggravated murder, which paved the way for extensive interrogations of everyone who had access to the park's technical areas and equipment on the day of the tragedy. The investigation began to gather data on conflicts, financial obligations, and personal relationships between Anna and Aaron, hoping to find a motive that would lead someone to turn the clear waters of Ginnie Springs into an execution site. The detailed report on the condition of the bones became the foundation for a new search strategy, where the focus was no longer on finding the missing, but on identifying whose hands left these deadly marks on the remains of the young couple. Before we continue to investigate this intricate case, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below the video, and like it. This is extremely important because YouTube's algorithms work in such a way that your activity helps promote this video, allowing more viewers to learn about this story and help in the search for justice. Your support is the main incentive to create more detailed investigations. Following the official identification of the remains in June 2016, the investigative team led by Detective Michael Miller focused on examining the immediate family of the deceased couple in an effort to identify individuals who may have had a real motive for the physical removal of Aaron Norman and Anna Mayer. Aaron's older brother, 30-year-old Stephen Norman, was the first to come to the attention of law enforcement. According to the archives of corporate documents, after the death of their father in December 2011, the brothers inherited a large construction company, Norman Estate Holdings, whose assets were estimated at several tens of millions of dollars. During a second interrogation in July 2016, the firm's former lawyer told the investigators that in the 6 months before the disappearance, the brothers had been engaged in protracted and aggressive disputes over the management strategy and distribution of the controlling stake. Aaron, as a successful manager, insisted on modernization and attracting external investment, while Stephen sought an immediate sale of some of the assets to cover his own significant debts. According to the company secretary, 2 weeks before the fatal trip to Guinea Springs, Aaron had a heated conversation in his office, during which Stephen openly threatened his brother with lawsuits and serious consequences if he did not sign the veto waiver documents. Detectives found that on the day of June 12, 2012, Stephen Norman had no confirmed alibi. In his initial statement 4 years ago, he claimed to have been at a remote construction site in Marion County, 30 miles from the park. But a check of his cell phone billing and gas station surveillance footage failed to confirm his whereabouts during the critical time period between 12 and 15 o'clock in the afternoon. During an interrogation at the sheriff's office in July 2016, Stephen appeared tense but continued to deny any involvement in the deaths of his brother and his fiancée. According to the report, he admitted that they hardly ever talked about personal matters and that their relationship was strictly business and tense, but insisted that financial disagreements could not have caused the murder. The investigation examined Stephen's bank accounts in detail and found that immediately after Aaron was officially reported missing, he gained sole control over the company's funds, which allowed him to pay off mortgages worth more than $800,000. Despite the obvious financial gain, no direct evidence of Stephen's presence in the water or at the entrance to Devil's Eye Cave was found. This forced the detectives to expand the scope of the investigation and return to analyzing the physical evidence that had been recovered from the bottom, along with the remains. The investigative team decided to engage experts in high-technology microscopy to re-examine all the equipment: fins, masks, tanks, and the wetsuits themselves. Particular attention was paid to Hannah Mayer's personal belongings, including her waterproof watch and bags, which were found on the shore. Investigators hoped that microscopic particles of materials that do not belong to the natural environment of the cave, fragments of paint, metal, or synthetic fibers that could have been introduced during contact with the killer when the equipment was being prepared, could have been preserved on the surface of the equipment. The forensic laboratory began a layer-by-layer examination of the neoprene surface, using light sources of different wavelengths to detect foreign microparticles. Every inch of the equipment was digitally processed, as detectives realized that if the killer was professional and knew how to hide the bodies 50 feet deep in an intricate tunnel system, the only chance of finding him was what he left behind at the level of particles invisible to the naked eye. While Stephen Norman's financial motive remained the main working theory, forensic scientists began to prepare a report on newly discovered trace elements that began to appear during a detailed examination of the victim's gear's zippers and valves, indicating the presence of an unauthorized person in close proximity to the pair as they made their final preparations for the fatal dive. In July of 2016, while the financial statements of Norman Estate Holdings were being scrutinized, a major breakthrough in the case occurred within the walls of the Alachua County Forensic Laboratory. Elizabeth Ward, a leading forensic scientist in the Microscopic Research Department, conducted a detailed inspection of a 7mm thick wetsuit belonging to Anna Mayer. When she examined the teeth of the main zipper on the back of the suit with an electron microscope with a magnification of 100 times, she found a foreign element that did not belong to the victim's equipment. It was 3 microscopic fibers of orange fabric sandwiched between the metal elements of the zipper. Initial spectral analysis showed that the fibers consisted of a specific combination of polyester and nylon with high resistance to chlorinated water. The color pigment had a unique chemical code used only for the industrial production of professional workwear. Detective Michael Miller immediately made inquiries with specialty clothing companies in the High Springs area. On July 25, 2016, the answer came back. The identical material and color were used exclusively for the production of uniforms for the technical staff of the Blue Depth Resort Diving Complex. It was in this facility that on June 12, 2012, Anna Mayer and Aaron Norman rented tanks and underwent the final check of equipment before diving into the Santa Fe River system. This physical evidence was key, as it indicated direct physical contact between the facility employee and Hannah's equipment at the time of preparation for the dive. The investigation immediately shifted its focus from family conflicts to the internal structure of Blue Depth Resort. The administration of the facility provided the police with archival records for June 2012, but the investigation faced a serious obstacle. Over the past 4 years, the staff had been renewed by almost 90%. Many seasonal workers, students, and instructors had moved throughout the state of Florida or even left the country. The police began to rebuild the list of people who had access to the cylinder preparation and regulator maintenance area. According to the complex's job descriptions, technicians were required to wear orange T-shirts and jackets with reflective elements to ensure visibility near the compressor stations. Detectives began a methodical search for former employees using tax records and social media. The main focus was on technicians who were on duty during the daytime shift from 8 in the morning to 16 in the afternoon. Of particular interest were individuals who were qualified to work with internal air supply valves and fill oxygen mixtures. According to the former manager of the facility, who testified by phone from California, the control system at the time was flawed. Technicians often helped clients fasten their wetsuits or check the attachment of tanks just before they entered the water. The fibers found in Hannah's suit zipper indicated that someone in an orange uniform was standing directly behind the girl and could have made any manipulations with her equipment while she was focused on her training. The detectives gained access to the duty schedule for June 12, 2012, which contained 7 names of technical personnel. Gradually, the circle was narrowed down to those who not only had access to equipment, but also had specific knowledge of the geography of the underwater caves where the bodies were later found. The forensic report on the orange microfibers was officially added to the case as direct evidence of the presence of an unauthorized person in the victim's personal space. The sheriff's office began preparing a series of subpoenas for interrogation to establish the exact route of each technician's movement on that fateful Saturday 4 years ago. Another important aspect was the fact that some employees quit the Blue Depth Resort only a few weeks after the couple was officially reported missing, which raised additional suspicions among investigators. The search for the truth now depended on how accurately the detectives could recreate the events at the gas station, where the noise of the compressors could drown out any sounds, and the daily work routine could hide the beginning of a cruel and cold-blooded plan. Investigators began looking into the personal files of each of the 7 suspects, searching for any clues, from administrative penalties to customer feedback on their behavior. One of the detectives noticed that the technicians' work uniforms were made of a dense synthetic fabric that leaves marks only when subjected to strong friction or pinching, which confirmed the version that the killer had physical contact with the victim on the beach. This discovery moved the investigation into a new phase where the main enemy was not time or water, but a man who knew how to make death invisible to others. In August of 2016, when the first results of the microfiber analysis confirmed a direct physical link between Anna Mayer's equipment and the uniforms of the Blue Depth Resort diving staff, detectives from the Alachua County Sheriff's Office began a large-scale wave of re-interviews. The investigative team tried to recreate every minute of the couple's stay at the facility on June 12, 2012. The former administrator of the complex, Catherine Hall, whom detectives found in the state of Carolina, recalled during the official recording of her testimony that Aaron Norman had attracted the attention of the staff at 11:30 in the morning. According to her, Aaron looked extremely irritated because of a 10-minute delay in the check-in line. Catherine said that the man behaved arrogantly, looking at his expensive watch and making harsh remarks about the incompetence of the staff. However, the main incident that stuck in the staff's minds occurred right in the technical equipment preparation area. Former waiter Jeffrey Baker, who was serving orders on the summer terrace next to the compressor station that morning, confirmed that he witnessed a violent conflict. He described how Aaron Norman, holding 2 cylinders, was literally screaming at a young technician in an orange t-shirt. The reason for the outburst of anger was the allegedly unacceptable condition of the rented equipment. Aaron claimed that there were traces of technical grease on the valves and the surface of the cylinders, which could contaminate his personal wetsuit. Witness Jeffrey Baker clearly recorded in his testimony Aaron's words, which he shouted at the entire technical area. He called the staff of the complex trash, who have no room for error, as their only function is to serve customers like him without fail. Anna Mayer, according to Baker's testimony, stood a few feet away from the groom and did not try to intervene, only silently checking the tightness of her mask. The technician who was responsible for filling the cylinders that day and became the object of humiliation was 24-year-old Brian Walker. His colleagues, interviewed by detectives in August 2016, described Brian as an extremely reserved person with a sickly ego. One of his former senior instructors, Stephen Wolf, noted that Walker had a reputation as a true fan of his craft. He knew every branch of the Ginnie Springs cave system and often spent his free time carving routes on his own in the most dangerous sectors where visibility was virtually zero. Wolf recalled that after Aaron Norman publicly insulted Brian, the technician was in a state of deep, gloomy silence for the next 2 hours. He methodically continued to prepare the equipment, but his movements were abrupt and his eyes were fixed on the couple. According to witnesses, it was Brian Walker who personally helped Anna Mayer fasten her wetsuit on her back and fix the heavy cylinders, which required considerable physical effort and close contact. This explained why the orange microfibers of his work jacket got stuck in the zipper of the girl's suit. Detectives found that Brian had a top-category diver's certificate, which allowed him to dive to depths of more than 100 feet in narrow cave corridors without fear of disorientation. The investigation report states that Walker resigned from Blue Depth Resort 8 weeks after the couple's disappearance, citing a desire to change careers. It is noteworthy that during the initial staff interview in 2012, Brian provided only general testimony, claiming that he did not remember any conflicts and that his work with the couple ended when the equipment was handed over. However, new testimony from former employees and the physical evidence found formed a completely different picture of events. Investigators began to suspect that the professional pride of the expert technician, who had been publicly dragged through the mud, could have been the catalyst for developing a revenge plan in an environment where he was the boss. Walker's psychological profile, compiled by analysts, indicated a tendency to accumulate resentment and a high probability of a cold-blooded reaction to neglect. Detective Michael Miller emphasized that Walker not only knew the caves, he felt absolutely safe in them, unlike the tourists, whom he openly disregarded. The sheriff's office has begun the process of identifying Brian Walker's current whereabouts, realizing that the man who saw Aaron and Anna moments before their fatal step into the water is hiding much more than just a work-related error. Every witness who saw Brian that day noted his strange transformation, from an ordinary worker to a man whose gaze radiated icy calm after suffering an insult. Investigators were preparing for a direct confrontation with the suspect, with forensic evidence proving that he was the last person to touch Hannah Mayer before she disappeared forever into the dark waters of Santa Fe. On September 15, 2016, a task force led by Detective Michael Miller arrived in Savannah, Georgia, where, according to official records, 28-year-old Brian Walker had lived for the past 3 years. He was found in a small private auto repair shop on the outskirts of the city, where he worked as a mechanic. During his first official interrogation at the local police station, Walker behaved with restraint, his face showing no emotion. According to the official report, he told the investigators that during his work at the Blue Depth Resort diving complex, thousands of visitors had passed through his hands, and he had no recollection of a particular couple named Anna Mayer and Aaron Norman. However, an authorized search of his home and rented garage yielded results that completely refuted the version of his ignorance. In a metal box among his tools, detectives found a notebook with diagrams of the Guinea Springs cave system drawn with extraordinary precision. One of the pages depicted a map of a remote sector where a narrow limestone depression was marked Vault in blue ink. The coordinates of this point on the map coincided to within an inch of the place where the remains were discovered in June 2016. A heavy metal industrial-type adjustable wrench was found there, wrapped in an oily rag. A forensic examination conducted the next day at the Alachua County Laboratory confirmed that the configuration of the striking part of this tool matched the size and shape of the dents in the skulls and ribs of the victims. The decisive technical evidence came from data from a portable navigation device taken from Walker's desk. Digital forensic specialists managed to recover the archive root points for June 12, 2012. According to the data obtained at 20:45 minutes in the evening, 4 hours after the official end of his shift, the device recorded the owner's presence directly at the entrance to the Devil's Eye Cave. Although in his initial testimony 4 years ago, Walker claimed that he was already at home in another county at that time. When Detective Miller presented Brian with the results of the microfiber analysis of the orange fabric found in Hannah's wetsuit zipper and the affidavits of former colleagues about the violent conflict, Walker changed his tactics. According to the video recording of the interrogation, he admitted that he was the one who had developed the map of the remote sector of the cave, arguing that it was his professional interest in complex underwater routes, but continued to deny the attack. Under pressure from the facts, he began to provide explanations that increasingly pointed to his direct presence at the scene of the tragedy. Brian stated that he had indeed returned to the source that evening, as he had allegedly forgotten his personal belongings on the shore and had seen Aaron's empty SUV in the parking lot. Gradually, during the hours-long interview, Walker began to describe details of the dive that only a person who was 50 feet below the surface, at the time the air supply stopped, could know. He told the investigators in detail about the specifics of the acoustics inside the cave during the diver's panic and how easy it is to lose your bearings in narrow corridors when the main light is turned off. The detectives noticed that a subtle smile appeared on his face when he was talking about the helplessness of the rich tourists. His explanations of how to manipulate the equipment allowed the investigation to establish a clear link between the mechanic's technical knowledge and the circumstances of the victims' deaths. Walker claimed that the vault in the diagram was intended to store a technical supply of cylinders, but his inability to explain the damage to the remains with his version of events finally convinced detectives of his involvement. Each new word from Brian Walker became another link in the chain of evidence that transformed the case from a missing person to a documented act of premeditated double murder. By the end of the interrogation, which lasted more than 6 hours, investigators had enough information to formally file charges, despite the absence of a formal confession at the time, as the technical data from his devices and the results of the tool's trace evidence left no room for other interpretations. In October of 2016, under the continuous pressure of the collected evidence and the results of the trace evidence, Brian Walker signed a full confession of guilt, which forever recorded his name in the history of Florida forensic science as one of the most cold-blooded killers. During the official reenactment of the events, which lasted more than 8 hours and was captured on video at the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, Walker demonstrated a complete lack of emotional remorse, describing the murder with the technical precision of an engineer. According to his testimony, he came up with the plan instantly after Aaron Norman publicly humiliated him in the tech area, calling him trash. Walker said he used a thin steel needle to clean the injectors to deliberately deform the internal pedal valve in both victims' regulators, while he was supposedly helping them check for leaks. He knew that at a depth of more than 30 feet, when the water pressure increased, the deformed valve would begin to block the oxygen supply, creating a gradual suffocation effect that divers often confuse with a panic attack. Walker admitted that after the pair disappeared under the Devil's Eye, he quickly donned his own equipment, which he kept in the office, and dived in after them. Using his knowledge of the Santa Fe River's underwater currents, he kept in the shadows of rocky outcroppings, turning off his flashlight every time the couple looked back. When Hannah and Aaron reached a remote cavern 50 feet below the surface and realized that their air supply systems were virtually non-functional, Walker waited until they were completely disoriented. He described watching their chaotic movements in the darkness for several minutes before closing in. In his confession, Brian confirmed that he struck each of them twice with a heavy adjustable wrench to the parietal bone, using the inertia of the water to amplify the blow. He stated that he wanted the last thing they saw to be a man in an orange uniform who they perceived to be inferior to them. After the murders, he methodically dragged the bodies into a narrow alcove he called a vault and removed weight belts weighing 15 pounds each to keep the bodies from floating and remain trapped in the fissure. The trial, which began in May 2017, was a real ordeal for the families of the victims. The prosecutor's office presented more than 200 slides of evidence to the jury, including digital coordinates from Walker's navigator and the results of an examination of the microfibers trapped in Anna's wetsuit zipper. The key moment of the trial was the testimony of an expert in underwater engineering who confirmed that the damage to the valves was identical in nature and could not have occurred by accident. On May 17, 2017, the judge of Alachua County, addressing the defendant, noted that this crime was unprecedented in its insidiousness, as the killer used the very nature and technical helplessness of the victims as an instrument of death. Brian Walker was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder on 2 counts. The sentence was final: life imprisonment in a maximum security prison without the possibility of any early release. Walker did not show any reaction when the verdict was announced, only looking for a moment at Aaron's parents, who were in the courtroom. The case of Hannah Mayer and Aaron Norman was officially closed, but it forever changed the safety protocols at Guinea Springs Park. The Florida Diving Center Authority implemented new rules for equipment inspections by independent inspectors, and the video surveillance system was expanded to all technical areas. The story of the vault at a depth of 50 feet has become a dark legend among professional divers, reminding us that the true darkness of underwater caves sometimes lies not in the stone, but in the heart of a person who knows these labyrinths too well. 5 years later, a small plaque bearing the names of Anna and Aaron was erected on the bank of the Santa Fe River, serving as a warning that water always holds the truth, even if it takes a long 4 years to reveal it. The county's police archives have forever preserved this volume of the investigation as an example of how a microscopic detail found at the bottom of a cave can be stronger than the silence of a murderer and the thickness of the water that tried to hide his sin.